Welcome to the Flawed, Foolish and Fantastic podcast.
Welcome to the Flawed, Foolish and Fantastic podcast thing. Me and Kamalpreet Singh, we are flawed and foolish. We're the two idiots here, and you are our fantastic guests. And that's what we're here for. Our podcast is here to shine a light on individuals doing good work within the Punjabi community, irrelevant to what type of work they're doing, as long as it's legal. At the moment we haven't had any troubles.
That was it.
So I just want to say welcome to the podcast. Thank you for coming. And if you're all right, seeing, am I all right to crack on with the questions?
Go ahead. Thank you for having me.
No, it's all right. Well, you might regret that in a minute. The first question is always the most difficult for people, but who is Satnam Singh?
Still trying to find that out. Well, my name is Satnam Singh. I'm 37 years old. Born and raised in Denmark, which is a small country in Scandinavia. Like I said, born and raised there.
Yeah.
Everything I do is kind of Danish. The way I think is Danish. My voice in my head is Danish. My first language almost is Danish. So it's kind of a big part of my life, this whole Danish thinking, Danish being, and so forth. Obviously, very much, we can talk more about that later. But apart from that upbringing in Denmark, I'm very much focused on Sikhs. Sikh issues and Sikh history, Sikh philosophy, and so forth. But as we'll talk about more later, there's not really much of a Sikh Sangat in Denmark. So I'm in that regard, very much oriented towards the UK, a little bit Canada, a little bit the US as well.
Yeah. Well, no problem. So if that's the case, we're going to start off. We always start off with this question with everybody because the whole purpose of this is finding out more about you. So the first question is normally, tell me about your childhood, upbringing, family, whatever you want to share with us, please.
So my parents came to Denmark in the 70s, early 80s. I have two siblings, so we're three in total, a younger brother and an older sister. I kind of grew up in I wouldn't call it a ghetto area, but it was like a poor place compared to the rest of big parts of Denmark. But obviously growing up, I didn't really know that. That was just the norm for me. Later on as I grew up, I noticed there was a lot of crime in that area. Drugs and stuff like that was being sold. But you could say I had a kind of normal upbringing to a large degree. Went to a school nearby, had some wonderful teachers, and they were quite good at arousing my curiosity, especially like for historical stuff. I was kind of lazy as a child, didn't really like going to school, but I was quite good at it at the same time. So like if there was a test, I knew how to crack it. But the rest of the year, I wasn't really that active. So I think my teacher saw a lot of potential in me, but I was quite lazy, still am till this day. So I didn't really use it to my benefit until much later, if you can say it like that. As a kid, like I said, growing up, I wasn't really interested in the same topics as all other boys were, like football, sports, cars. None of that really mattered to me. I liked wrestling. There was another Punjabi family who lived nearby, so we watched a lot of WWF. So Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, those were my favorite ones. So that was the only sports thing I was involved with. So all my friends went to sports, played football, basketball, whatever it was. I wasn't really into that, but I used to like just be focused on the wrestling part. I don't know how deep I should go.
No, it's up to you. But I was just going to ask you, with regards to schooling, in Denmark, what was the school makeup? Because for me here, I'm talking, obviously I'm older than you, but in the 80s we went to school. We're from quite a deprived area here. It's not an affluent area in any way. When I went to school, there was only a few Asians in my class. And I mean, a real few. One of them was my own cousin in there, so that made up the numbers. But, there weren't that many. So did you have any difficulties being an Asian kid at school and, those sorts of things? And what was like I said, the makeup of your classes or schools like?
So Denmark is very different. There was not really that big of an immigrant population back then. There wasn't. Now there's been quite many more, so it's more diverse now. But I think in my classroom there was me and there was two other from Turkey, and then all the other ones were Guri, Danish people. So I kind of always grew up with this idea that I'm a little bit different to the other ones. I couldn't really identify with the Turkish people either because they were Muslims. Not that it really mattered, but I kind of knew I wasn't one of them. They had like this fasting and they had the Ramadan and stuff like that. They had their Eid celebration. I wasn't obviously part of that. So I kind of knew I don't belong with the Gore. I don't belong with the Muslims either. Kind of had my own little identity, so to speak, there. So I always kind of knew I kind of stood out from the rest of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you suffer anything within the class itself? Did you have any discrimination itself?
Not really. And I think maybe
That's okay.
the good thing here is that, not the good thing, but like I said, it was a deprived area. That's the kind of word I was looking for. So I didn't realize that until much later, until I became an adult. I found out this was a poor area, or like the school was very poor. So a lot of the other kids, not all, a lot, but many of them, like their parents had issues, psychological issues, mental health issues, abuse problems, and so forth. So it was a bit of an interesting classroom. So the Danish schooling system is such that you try to bring people from different walks of life together. It's called like the public school or the people's school. So like half of the class, they lived where I lived in the nearby residential areas. The other half of the class lived on the other side of the rail tracks, which was the rich area of town. But we all go to the same schools. So so you can see like we're in the same class, but half of them have a very good experience of childhood. And the other half, my half, we don't really have that in terms of like financial difficulties, economical difficulties, and so forth. So
did people actually mix based on their affluency? So did they just go, actually, the socially deprived individuals are going to stick together and then the rich people are going to stick together?
I think I was lucky in the sense that I had a teacher who was very, Ingelise Thompson, that was very focused on ensuring that the children were playing together, had like play dates and were mixing. So just give you a very practical example. I didn't go to the cinema until I was 13. And that was only because my best friend Johan, who was from one of the richer areas of the town, his parents took me to the cinema. The half of the class, we couldn't really afford that. It wasn't really something we saw any value in going to the cinema. You could just watch TV at home. So it's interesting that I kind of grew up in this little mix of poor kids. Obviously, we didn't know we were poor. We just found out that later on when we became older. But now just jumping a little bit, like in recent years, I've been quite interested in my childhood, like what happened in my early years. And I reached out to my teacher just to hear like what was her impression of me as a child, what was going on and all the things that were happening in my family and so forth. Like as a professional teacher, how were you looking at us as a family unit? And after I left there, she gave me this box of things to take home. It was like pictures. So she kept these for like 20 years now. It was pictures. There was a little teddy bear that we had in this classroom. And we had just like general like drawings and paintings that we had done and so forth. And she asked me if I wanted it. Obviously, I took it back home. Now, here's the interesting thing. We had this concept in second grade where we had this teddy bear called Enson. And Enson every weekend had to go to one of the pupils' home. So obviously every few months it was my turn to take him home, and then we had to write in a book what had Enson, this little monkey, been doing. And I actually remember I was always stressed out when Enson had to come to I remember this even. I was always very stressed out, like because I needed to write in that book. And obviously the other children, their parents used to write it. But my mom and dad, they weren't that good at Danish, so it was either me or my older sister. So that's one thing. I just remember I was always stressed out because I had to write a lot and like also do something useful, something fun with this monkey, so that in the morning they could read it out to the school and basically say, what has Enson been doing? Now here's the thing, with my adult eyes looking back, I can see this split you can see this split very clearly with who are the rich kids and who are the poor ones, because the activities that the poor children have written in this is let me start with the rich ones. The rich ones, they took Enson to these family dinners, they took them to these extracurricular activities, they went maybe to the cinema, maybe at a restaurant on the Sunday evening. So all these fancy activities that rich people kind of do. But all the stories I was reading just a few months ago with us poor kids is basically just sitting watching TV with the monkey. Just eating a lot of food. There's nothing, and it really just shows you like the differences, the social differences between the same children in the same class.
Yeah.
Like the opportunities, basically, that there were. So yeah, sorry, there's a bit of a detour, but I kind of realized, but I didn't see that growing up. But now looking back, it was a kind of deprived area.
Yeah.
Later on, we can talk about the teenage years, crime, flirting with criminal activities, and so forth. That was kind of a no-brainer in that area. This is kind of what you did when you grew up. Started doing a little bit of crime here and a little bit of there.
Yeah.
But that's just how things were. You didn't really think of it.
Well, that was the norm in the area.
That was the norm, really. Yeah.
So, your education, I'm guessing, is the standard of education similar to how it is here? You know, you got a junior school, then you go to a secondary school up until the age of 16, sit your exams, and then off to college or university. How does it work there?
I think it's a little bit more simplified. So from your 6 till you're 16, you go to what we call public school.
Yeah.
And then you go to college for 3 years, and then you have university.
Okay.
So it's just 3 units, basically.
So that's what. So let's talk about, you've talked about family and things like that. You've talked about a bit of the education. Obviously, my next question was going to be, what was it like growing up as an Asian child in Denmark? You've sort of touched upon that. And you've talked about, obviously, the affluency and the social economic deprivation within your area, which led to the way you were brought up. Because that was the same. I look back at it now. I've been lucky. I've been able to take my kids out and do whatever, all sorts of things. We've gone to all sorts, but my parents didn't have that money. You know, my evenings were consisting of sitting in front of TV.
Yep.
There was nothing else. A Sunday it was going to the Gurdwara and seeing relatives. That was about it, the most. But there was nothing else. So I understand where you're coming from now. But you say, you know, you've gone from that stage. At what stage, you know, you said in your teens you got into crime, criminality, whatever, but what does that mean? What was your social circle like? What were your the influences around you like? And like you said, at that point, you're getting to that point where that stage in your life where you become more aware of the materialistic things that other people have got. So tell me about that. Tell me about when you got to that stage, and how did it affect your education and social life at home? Yeah.
So you can imagine me living or being in this classroom for 10 years, like I said, from 6 to 16, with the same people, with the same teachers as well, throughout those almost 10 years. So half of my class are people like me. Obviously, they're from Danish backgrounds as well, but they're people like me. They don't have much. They're not really that privileged. Then I'm looking at the other class, half of the class, and they're very privileged to have all these opportunities and so forth. And I was always trying to like move upwards. So I didn't really want to hang out with these people that look like me. I wanted to be with the rich kids. So whatever they were doing, I was trying to aspire to it. So back then, Donald Duck was you know those cartoons. I used to read that quite a lot. I think I learned how to read through Donald Duck, and I taught English through watching The Simpsons. But I tried to like aspire to what they were doing. So they had all these extracurricular activities. We couldn't afford it at home. So I used to just kind of like find my way out and see if I could just participate in the football after school with them, or I wasn't really interested. I just kind of knew that like I have to somehow socialize, make an effort as I became older. But at some point, I think I just got tired of trying so hard because they weren't really me. I was just trying to be something I'm not. So I started hanging out with people more like me from the deprived areas. And this is the time where I started hanging out with a lot of people with Turkish background and Kurdish background and a few Arabs as well. So I kind of distanced myself from all the Guri, you can say. This is like teenage years. Unfortunately, a lot of them are doing criminal activities. Not like in the terms of like gang environment or like
low level crime. Low level crime, whatever, antisocial behavior, things like that. That's what
just happens. Like going to the neighboring city to beat up people and come back home, or like try to smash some windows and just minor things. And the funny thing here, not funny, but I wasn't really good at that either. So I was a little bit of that odd one out. I didn't really fit in with the privileged kids. I didn't really want to hang out with the ones who looked a little bit like me, because I think it reminded me of like the situation at home as well. And then I was trying to hang out with these people with immigrant backgrounds, but they were criminals. And a lot of them ended up in crime afterwards as well. And I didn't really fit in there either. I'm giving like a fun example. So one day, I remember I'm like 14 at this time. I went to a neighboring city to. We went to a neighboring city to like fight it out with some of the kids over there. And this is like something we just used to do every now and then. We just went there, took the bus because we didn't have scooters or cars. Went there, fought, and then we just went back. And one time, I think I had hit someone so hard that I actually think I had like damaged him or like injured him, and I felt so bad. So I found him on MSN Messenger. Remember that program?
Yeah.
Just to apologize to him. Like, I'm so sorry for what happened.
The guilt was doing you.
I felt really guilty. Like, oh my God, I wasn't supposed to do that.
Yeah.
So after that day, I kind of just left that crowd as well. And here's the thing. Elise, my old teacher, she was very good at them. I think she saw a lot of potential in me. And she said that when I met her up with her last year or a few months ago. She saw I was hanging out with the wrong kinds of people. And she knew I was quite good at school if I bothered to actually do stuff. So she was always trying to like disrupt my behavior and my activities with them a lot. So I kind of like grew out of there because a lot of them started doing hashish and marijuana and all these things. That wasn't really for me either. So what I'm trying to say is like, you can see like I have some interest in like history and like school stuff, but I'm just too lazy to really do it. Then I'm also like very much seeking an identity. And I try to like be part of these different groups, but I'm always like staying a little bit on the outskirts. I'm like kind of in, but I'm not really in with this group. I'm kind of in here, but I'm not really in there either. And then as I've grown older, I can kind of see this personality trait that has followed me all the way up until very recently. Like kind of in, but not really in. Kind of committed, but not really committed.
It's trying to stay in the circle, isn't it? It's trying to stay in the circle and be relevant, but not actually, you're not interested in doing those sorts of things. So no, that was it. So you say you backed out of that sort of group. What age were you then?
So here I think I was 15, 16.
15. So you're coming up to the end of your education at public school.
That's right.
How was your education in the end? If you're saying that the teacher saw this potential in you, but you didn't push yourself to that potential or that limit because it didn't grasp your attention, which I can totally understand that. How did education go for you in the end?
So there's something that happens in 8th grade that really puts me on a different trajectory. And this is a 9/11, the 9/11 attacks in America. I kind of really realized that I'm very interested in history or political, what do you call it? International politics. So what happens is that I start to show a remarkable interest in what's going on around in the world. So during my exams in the 9th grade, which is like the last step in school, I write a report on the Israel-Palestine conflict, which is obviously very relevant these days. But I get a top grade. I was the only one in class who got that top grade. So obviously that gave me a lot of like confidence,
encouragement.
And I was really. I wrote a lot of these. Novels about Osama bin Laden and like what was happening inside the World Trade Center, like from the perspective of people who were working there, like creating these little stories. And obviously I started working in this field much later on as well. But like 9/11 was really a deal breaker, so to speak, in terms of my identity and personality. Also like pushing me into the aspect of religious search. Like in my formative years from 6 to 16, Sikhi or just religion in general is not really a thing in my home either. It's not really something that we don't go to the Gurdwara. We don't really talk about Sikhi. I mean, obviously we had the images of the gurus, but that was kind of it.
That was normal, wasn't it?
I think like from I'm 0 years old to the age of 19, I've been to the Gurdwara 2 or 3 times in Copenhagen. Of course, you mentioned the Sikh community in Denmark is quite small. It's about 1,000 people in total on a good day. There was one Gurdwara back then. But like I said, I kind of grew up in a very secular kind of environment. It wasn't really a thing. It wasn't until much later I started even to know that I was a Sikh or like to even care about Sikhi.
So how did education finish? What do you want to talk about what you achieved at education and going on from there to college? Did you go to college? Did you go to university? Where did it go from public school? So after public school, I went into a business school. As part of like a college. So it was the business angle of college. I did that for 3 years. And that's I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but it was like you get money from doing business. Then I went to
Copenhagen Business School, which is a business university.
Yeah.
So I was studying economy and marketing and communication there.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't really that interested in it.
Yeah.
So eventually I just started doing a lot of, this is where I started getting into Sikhi as well. So I started getting more interested in like humanity work and like human rights work and stuff like that. So I just completed my studies there, but I kind of knew I need to go do something else.
Okay.
So after the 3 years at business school, I went to Copenhagen University to do something called cross-cultural studies,
Okay.
which is more about religion, politics, anthropology, sociology, all these very nerdy topics. So my educational background is very mixed. On the one hand, it's like very soft sciences of understanding human psychology, blah, blah. The other one is like more hard economy, finance, and so forth. So it's a bit of a mixed profile I have.
So by the time you got to university, did you know what you wanted to do? Obviously, I'm guessing you knew what you wanted to learn because, you got into the cultural stuff by then. Because after 9/11, you've had that moment of who am I, what am I, what is this that's going on politically? What did that entail, the 3 years at university? What did you learn about the different faiths, or was it just more sociology and family education, all that sort of thing?
Yeah, it was more that I was basically, to be honest, I was just doing it for the papers.
Yeah.
I needed something that would land me a good job later on. And all this economy and finance, it was just like, it's too much. All the people at my classroom just talking about money, stocks, and obviously cryptocurrency didn't exist back then, but they were just talking about money, making more money. And that wasn't really for me.
Yeah.
So I was just there to get the papers, and I did quite all right actually in school. But my dhyan at this time was much more in Sikhi and religion and like history, events of the world. I was watching the news like a news junkie.
Yeah.
That was a big part of my life at this time.
I think everybody has that switch at some point where you turn on to what the political movement is.
Yeah.
So after university, obviously you've done all your cultural stuff, cultural studies, the cross-cultural studies. Where did that lead you to with regards to a job, or did you get a job from it, or within that field itself?
So it's quite interesting because after I graduated, in a few years, let's take a step back. While I was in uni, I was looking for what we call a student job. I just need to earn some money so I can help out at home. So during this time, my parents have gotten divorced, by the way. I forgot to mention that. So my parents got divorced when I was about 9-10 years old.
Yeah.
We lost all contact with my father, and then I was raised by my mom ever since. So I needed, from an early age, I needed to help out at home to contribute to the household. So I started working since I was like 13 years old. I've been working nonstop since I was 13. Even like my teachers back then had to tell me, you need to like prioritize school because you're almost working full time while you're going to school. And I was like 15 at this time. So when I came to uni, I needed to land some jobs that were earning a little bit more money. So it was just like the typical phoner jobs. Like you just call someone and ask if they want a subscription for like an insurance company, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't really paying that well. I wasn't really a good salesman either. So I didn't really get that much money. Long story short, I applied for this job at the city of Copenhagen. It's like what we call integration work. So it was like I can't remember what it was, but it was basically an integration project where you were doing something with the Arabs in the city, celebrating the diversity of the like stuff like that.
Yeah.
I applied for it, and during this time, this is the funny thing, I was writing a exam report about a guy called Jason Burke, who was a political scientist that focused on Al-Qaeda at this time. I was very interested in Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and all these terrorist groups, because all the news was just about terrorist attacks back then. I don't know if you remember. That was all over the news every time. London bombs, Madrid bombs. Then you had in Indonesia, the Bali bombs, just bombs going off everywhere. Al-Qaeda was just claiming responsibility for all of it. So I was just writing this report at work. And then during the job interview, I just... there's a break because one of them has to leave. She has a phone call, and they start talking to one of the men in the panel, and we're just talking about this report that I'm writing on, and he thinks I sound to be very well read in the area of like Al Qaeda and terrorism studies and stuff like that. And obviously I was, because I've been watching the news nonstop since 9/11. They call me later in the day and say, we can't offer you this job, unfortunately. We have someone who's more skilled, but he says, we're setting up Copenhagen's first national program of counter radicalization work.
Okay.
And we would like to have you on board as a student helper. I was like, cool. I just needed a job, really.
Yeah. So it was a paid position. It was a paid position.
Yeah, it was a paid position as a student helper. And little did I know that I'll be doing this for the next 10 years or something like that of my life. And then obviously, we're talking more about it later, but like the world erupted after that. Kids went in Denmark, got recruited into Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, ISIS later on. So I was involved in a lot of the counter-radicalization work that was happening at this time. And I was just a student helper at the time, but then I finished my degree. They hired me full-time after that. And then I was doing that for many, many years onwards.
Rather than going into Sikhi stuff, I'd rather go into your work first.
Yeah, sure.
With regards to that, obviously some of it's going to be politically sensitive and something's going to be security sensitive. So I wouldn't expect you to speak about everything. But what did that work entail? You've mentioned like Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, Daesh and things like that. But what did that actually entail? And was it just focused on, because from that it's just Islamic radicalization, but was it focused on anything else as well?
So to begin with, it was primarily Islamic extremism and then left-wing to a very little degree. So right-wing extremism didn't really exist. It came later on, around 2015-16, we started doing more of that work. But here we're in 2009 here when I started. This is where Al-Qaeda was kind of fading out and the Somalian group Al-Shabaab was kind of gaining traction. And then a few years later, Daesh or ISIS started appearing on the scene. The work I was doing was basically to kickstart this initiative or this project in the city of Copenhagen. So a lot of it was, I think in the English you call it frontline work, like train the trainer programs. So we had to teach teachers, social workers, police officers what to look out for in order to safeguard individuals. Like the safeguarding is a big aspect of it. It's not police work. It's not surveillance work. It's from a social perspective. So we're trying to help these individuals, these children, to not get brainwashed. So it's a safeguarding perspective I was working on. So one thing is, how do you, as a professional, how do you look out for these students? What signs should you be looking out for and understand the processes of radicalization? So our approach, because I was not working for the intelligence service or anything like that, was basically like to understand what is it that these groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, what is it that they offer? It's like pull and push factors.
Exactly.
So what is it that they offer these individuals? And a lot of these young children, they were, we call it vulnerable children. Had a lot of grievances with society, have felt discriminated. A lot of them came from traumatized homes, have been abused as children. So there's a lot of trauma with them. So a lot of these are looking for brotherhood. They're looking for some kind of belonging. And these groups are very good, till this day, they're very good at exploiting that hole or that loss that the people are fearing. And basically provide a brotherhood, provide a sense of belonging. At the same time, they brainwash you and eventually send you off to Syria, to the battlefield, to blow yourself up or whatever. But in the beginning, what they offer is like brotherhood and social relations, and they help each other out. It's a very close-knit community. So you can see from our side, we're trying to pull you out of those and see, all right, what you're looking for is safety and belonging. You need some structure in your life. Let's see if we can help them with school. We can help them find them a job. We can help them. They need psychological help, mental health, where maybe some of the traumas that they've had from their childhood. How can we help in that area and so forth? So a lot of my job was twofold. One of it was this thing with train the trainer programs, but the other one was to set up what we call mentorship programs. So we have these individuals who we need to pull out of these. Remember there's a group here called Al Muhajirun, and Jim Chaudhry.
That
was his group, or Sharia for UK. I think we were also going by that name. So he had like a branch in Copenhagen at the time. That it was called the Call to Islam, I think. And these were like the main guys recruiting people in Denmark at the time.
Was that in universities and places like that? Because that's what they were doing here.
No, they were recruiting people from the streets. So it was more like former gang members, former abuse, substance abuse and so on. It wasn't really people with a little bit of
intellect or academic behind them.
Exactly.
So it was just those people that they could influence and bring in.
We had another group called the Hizb ut-Tahrir. They were, back then, not now, but back then they were recruiting primarily from from the universities and stuff like that. But then only for a few years, then people kind of knew this is bullshit what they're talking about, and then they started recruiting from the streets as well.
Okay.
But it was primarily these kind of individuals like off the street.
Okay.
So sorry, I went off tangent there. But the other part was to make these mentorship programs to match. All right, there's a kid here who needs some kind of assistance. We need to pull him out of this group. The other one is how do you match him with a mentor who can be a kind of role model for him. So I was the person doing that matchmaking. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And quite often we would find out about these individuals in two ways. One was obviously because they were always on the street doing their street dava. So we kind of knew who they were. It's a small country in a small city. But the other one was that there were frontline professionals who would alert us and say, I have a student who's starting to say weird shit in class, or I have this kid I'm concerned about who's always hanging out on the street. Can you figure out and blah, blah, blah. So then they would call us and we would just like have a conversation with the family or with the individual himself. So in that sense, that's the work I was doing for about many, many years.
So where did your referrals come from? Did they come from everywhere? Because your referrals, so you had a referral.
Yeah.
So you just said, like, I've got a student, somebody saying, so that's come from your education policy. Did they come, so Prevent here you'd get a referral from either education, you'd get it from hospitals, you'd get it from, families, you'd get it from community, you'd get it from everywhere. So it depends on where it comes from. Did you have something similar?
So in the early years, if I remember correctly, this is many years ago, by the way. But if I remember correctly, around 2009 to 2014, it was primarily from the schools. It was from the after curricular activity, personal, and a little bit the social workers who were talking to a family and they got involved. Later on, 2014, 15, this is when ISIS and everything kicks off in Syria. It was more and more from the
psychiatric wards and psychiatric groups,
Yeah, because they were recruiting a lot of people who had big mental issues.
Well, of course, because it's easy to get those sorts of people to go, well, they don't care about themselves now.
Easy to send them off to Syria to blow themselves off.
Yeah.
So we got a lot of calls, and this is where me and my colleagues, we didn't really know what to do, because we can work with an individual you can talk to.
Yeah.
We can kind of it's a battle of ideas and we kind of fill out their social needs.
Yeah.
But if it's a person that has a lot of stuff going up here, what can we do?
Nothing, because you need a clinical psychologist to deal with that.
Exactly. And this is why everything started kicking off really quickly. And a lot of Denmark, if I remember correctly, was one of the countries, considering its small size, where most people went off to Syria.
Yeah. And how long did you work there for? You worked there for about 10 years, so
I was in this field for about 10 years, from 2009 to 2019, roughly. This work in the city of Copenhagen was around 2009 to 2017.
Okay.
Then the last 2 years of that, I was working for the Ministry of Education. So I was just working with schools, not on individuals.
Okay.
It was just a whole schools, how to ensure that kids do not get radicalized here as a school institution, and not just focusing on the individual person.
Yeah. So you went from looking at...
I have a tendency to go off track quite a lot, so feel free to...
it's your talk. That's the whole point.
Feel free to
no,
me back in.
Well, it's interesting because, like you said, you had a targeted approach, which was individuals, and then you went to a more strategic approach on a
that's a good way
level
to put it.
later on.
Yeah.
No, that's fine. Right, I'm going to pull you back now. The next question is going to be, tell me about the good Sikh awareness days and the developments of your own knowledge and identity, because you said you got to that stage where you were just like, well, what am I? Who am I? Was that about the time you jumped on that board?
So I think it happened...
Because I know you as Amardeep Singh. That's what you were when you were first on there. You were Amardeep Singh. That's it.
There's a funny story about that. So he's talking about Sikh Awareness, which was a website. I don't know if it still exists.
Yeah, still on. I think it is. It's still there.
This is like the pre-Facebook days where you had these platforms, Sikh Sangat, Sikh Awareness, and so forth. And I signed up to that. I needed a username. And remember I said I grew up in a deprived area. My parents got divorced.
Yeah.
My teacher, she was afraid that I was hanging out with all these criminal youth.
Yeah.
A lot of them went into hardcore criminality later on. So she wanted me to have my teacher English, she wanted me to have positive role models, like male role models in my life.
Yeah.
So she kind of hooked me up she actually saw me as a vulnerable child who could like end up in criminal activities or even like extremist environments if that existed back then. So she wanted me to have positive role models, and she hooked me up with this Punjabi guy named Amardeep.
Okay.
So I must have been like 12 or 13 at this time, and he was, I don't know, mid-20s or whatever. So he became my mentor, but we didn't use that word back then. So he used to take me out. A lot of the mentor work that we were doing with these things, he was doing that with me.
Okay.
When I was 12, and my younger brother was a part of it as well. Took us out, went to the cinema. I don't know. We went to Tivoli, like an amusement festival park, whatever you want to call it. Just walk and talks, all these things.
Yeah.
Just because they could see that it wouldn't take much for me to end up with the wrong crowd. So somehow this is interesting. He was an inspirational role model for me. I even think I've mentioned him in my book in the acknowledgement section. I lost contact with him 20 years ago, something like that. But I used him. But he was a Sikh as well. Obviously, his name was Amardeep. I used him as my profile name for many, many years, writing under that name.
Yeah, because I can remember it, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, my name's Satnam Singh. You're like, what? What's happened here? So no, that's how I remember you. I remember you coming on there. And like I said, so that would have been 2004, 2003?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, 2003, 2004, because that's when most of us are on there. And that's where I remember you being on there. I remember, like I said, Deedat was on there. Bahadur was on there. Loads of others were on there. Kamalpreet was on there every now and then. But yeah, there were quite a few. And it was that sort of thing. That's where I first got to know you. What is it that sparked your interest at the time in Sikhi?
So I think you guys joined in 2003. I came in 2007-ish.
Okay, yeah,
so a little bit later on, but it was a very solid website at this time. So all the good debates had been taking place, and obviously this is why I got alerted to Sikh awareness. But when I came into college, so this is from age 16 to around 19, obviously I was not the only one who was influenced or by the 9/11 incidents. All the Muslims in Denmark obviously also got much more aware of their own identity, their own religion, and a lot of them started following Islam. So when I came into college, I saw a lot of them starting following and observing Islam. They wanted to pray in the school and all that stuff. And a lot of them were trying to convert me. They were asking me questions like, what is this Sikhi about? And like I said, I didn't really come from a religious family, so I didn't really know what to say. Kind of knew the ins and outs, like there's one God, karma, reincarnation, but that was on that level, like buzzwords kind of thing. I remember there was a few people there who were like mocking me, saying, you think after you die you're going to come back as a donkey? Look at that donkey, that's probably your uncle, or just saying like weird shit like that, right? I remember thinking, in the beginning I didn't really care because religion didn't really mean much to me. At some point I started getting a little bit frustrated because I couldn't really give them a jawab back. So I started reading up on Sikhi in order to give them a jawab, give them a proper reply. And the more they were taking the mick out of Sikhi, the more I needed to read up on it. And they started saying things about the gurus and blah, blah, blah. Then I had to read up on the gurus' lives. Then saying things about gaze and nails. What's the difference? Why can you cut your nails, but you can't cut your gaze? And so obviously I started to read a lot. And this is like I said before, social media. This is before Facebook. This is before all these Wikipedia existed. So there wasn't really that many websites back then. So it kind of forced me as well to be really focused on finding information, buying books. There wasn't really that much available either. But because they were taking the mick of me, I knew I had to defend it somehow. And the more I was reading, the more I fell in love with Sikhi. The more I fell in love with these teachings. The more I fell in love with the gurus as well. So you could say this is kind of my way into Sikhi. I'm trying to defend it without really knowing what it's about. So what am I, 16 here at the time? Then this is where I start coming into Sikh awareness. There's a lot of the things they're talking about. The answers I find on the Sikh awareness board.
Because in those days there was Sikh awareness, Sikh Sangat, Tapoban, SikhNet. Those are about the only real ones that you could get your answers from. And I think for me, like I said, I used all of them, but the one that was prevalent was Sikh awareness because you had an open and honest debate. It wasn't shut off. It wasn't closed. And it was full of intellectuals as well. It was full of some serious intellectuals. So yeah, that's where I remember you from. So how did those 3 years at college? How did that develop you as a person? Obviously, you said you fell in love with the teachings of Sikhi and things like that. But what was it? Because for some people, they can go the other way. They're just like, oh, do I really want to learn about this? Do I really care? Do I really want to get involved in religion and politics? So I don't know what switches a person onto it or off it, but yeah, it's that sort of thing. So what was it for you?
So I think what it was is that at this time as well, I'm starting to kind of, let me think, how old am I here? So one thing is obviously all the online activities. So at this time, I'm kind of living not a double life, that's the wrong word to use, but like in my day life, I'm not really interested in Sikhi.
Yeah.
But I'm focused on school, I'm focused on just, whatever you do as a youngster there, confused kid. But I remember this, we had this big ass computer. We had this big computer at home, like back in the days.
You can swear on it.
Before the laptops were there, we had this massive, huge computer, took up so much space.
Yeah.
I remember I was sitting almost every night till 3:00, just reading about Sikh awareness debates, just trying to absorb and then learn. So obviously I can see now that I'm really getting hooked on Sikh here. At the same time, we start having camps in the Gurdwara.
Okay.
So here I start kind of slowly by slowly. I'm a Munna here. I start slowly by slowly coming to the Gurdwara. And they start to give me, in the Gurdwara, start to give me more and more responsibilities because I speak Danish, basically.
Yeah.
That's it. My only claim to fame is I spoke Danish. So they asked me to like teach the children about stories about Guru Nanak. And in that sense, they kind of give me a more of a leading role. I don't really speak Punjabi that well. I couldn't read Gurumukhi, anything like that. I was a Munna still at the time. But they start inviting people from the UK. So Sukhi Baba, he came quite often, if I remember correctly, like once a month. Manveer Singh, he also came regularly, like maybe every 6 months. So there was this attention also from people in the UK to like, let's nurture Sikhi in these countries with small populations of Sikhs.
Yeah.
I had very good, especially Sukhi Baba, remember, so I'm like 17, 18 years old here, had a lot of good, deep conversations with him. And obviously, because he looked like a Khalsa, he was wearing a bana. He looked like a proper, like, how the Khalsa of that time would have looked like. So I was very, like, just his physical appearance, I was very inspired by it. He was funny as hell, cracking jokes all the time. So he also just showed me a kind of a more chilled out kind of Sikh. Doesn't have to be so serious all the time. Also, because for me, I think Sikhi was an old man's religion. Because I didn't really grow up with, like I said, going to the Gurdwara. So whenever we did go there, it's just old people sitting there. So it was more of an old people's religion. But he showed me you can also still be youthful, have fun, crack jokes. I've always had a really weird sense of humor, and he had that as well, or have that as well. I don't know. So he was very inspirational. What happens is, I haven't really spoken much about this, but what happens is that there's a Singh from the UK who comes to Denmark, and I don't have to remember his name or anything, but he starts to like travel around Europe, and he's doing prachar of Amrit, taking Amrit, and he basically does a lot of prachar on that. Like, you need to be Amritari and take Amrit to be a Sikh. Otherwise, the Guru doesn't really care about you. Yeah. The Guru will turn his back on you. I remember I'm 18, 19 years old at the time. And it's kind of a shock for me, because this is not really my understanding of the Guru, that you need to take Amrit in order to be loved by the Guru. And I said, like, why would I take Amrit? Like, I don't even know how to read Gurumukhi. I remember the answer he gave me was that, why do you need to learn all these things before you take Amrit? It's like saying I want to learn how to read before starting in school. All these things is something you learn after you start in school. Similar, the Rahat, learning Gurumukhi, all these things, you learn it after you've taken Amrit. So I feel like there's a lot of pressure on us in that generation. We're quite new. We're very interested in Sikhi. And there's a lot of pressure on us. You're talking a lot about 84 as well. So there's a lot of like, trauma. Like, it's your responsibility. Everyone's trying to finish off the Sikhs. We need to stay alive. So it's more of an emotional blackmail, you can even say. So what happens is that at the age of 19, I go to Hamburg in Germany to a camp. I'm basically just following this guy who's traveling around in Europe. He came to Denmark first and then continued on to other countries. And me and a few others, we joined in and go to Germany. So this is where some of the mutual friends that we have, I know them from. And then this emotional blackmail, I don't know if it's the right word. People might criticize me for using that word after. But that's how it felt like, right?
Yeah.
Is consistently being used. Like, you need to take Amrit, otherwise you're a failure, and the Guru doesn't want you, doesn't love you, and you're kind of like you're betraying your own identity. And eventually I end up taking Amrit. And this is a time I've never done Part. I don't know the Mool Mantar. I don't know how to read Gurumukhi. But I have love for the Guru, for sure. That's about it. That's all I have, just love for the Guru. All these other things, I don't know. All of a sudden, I have this massive rehat I need to follow.
Yeah.
Obviously, purchase the gurkhas and stuff like that as well. But they provide that for me when I head back to Denmark afterwards. There was a few others from Denmark who took Amrit with me. But they were doing quite well afterwards. But I was struggling quite a lot. So I had to sit there mechanically do my Nitname. Couldn't even understand the words. I had to read it from like the Roman alphabet.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, it sounds a bit weird, but like it feels like a burden to me. Like I'm forced to follow all these rules. Whereas before I was more free in my Sikhi.
Yeah.
Like I said, I used to sit up every night. I wasn't awake at Amrit Villa.
Yeah.
I didn't wake up at Amrit Villa.
No, but you're still awake because you're reading through all night. Yeah.
Yeah, but I haven't really gone to sleep. I was still awake at Amrit Villa, but I hadn't really gone to sleep because I was just sitting there reading about the Guru and immersing myself in Sikhi. So I'm 19 here at this time. There's this massive burden on me. I need to follow the Rehat. If I don't wake up in the morning, I feel like shit. Like this, I feel like the worst person in the world. Like I said, I didn't follow the Rehat. I didn't follow the rules that were on me.
Yeah.
And at this time, I can see there's a lot of friends as well who are starting to
move away.
Yeah.
Step away. Yeah.
Because they can see I'm becoming more and more serious. I've always been quite a joker, but also I became very serious, obviously because I'm feeling like shit, because I'm not being a good Sikh. So I kind of take it out on them. So I'm losing friends here at the same time. And I'm growing a little bit of Hankar as well, because I feel like I'm the best Sikh in Denmark within this little group of us there. So it's a very tensional, tense moment in my life.
Yeah.
Eventually, I kind of realize I'm not being true to myself. It's more of a dakava. This is like 6 months in, so it's not something that goes on for years. 6 months in, I'm basically looking myself in the mirror, and I feel like I'm not in love with Sikhi anymore. It's just something I have to perform. I hated going to the Gurudwara because I was always fearing that they were asking me to do the Ardas, and I couldn't do the Ardas. I would humiliate myself.
Yeah.
When we went to the camps, all of a sudden, like, they would give me this stage now and preach to the young children of Denmark.
Yeah.
And I could easily tell them about history. I could tell them about philosophy. But if they asked me to like do any part or any nitname, it would freak me out.
Yeah.
I felt like they were going to bust me.
You're being tested, aren't you? That's how you feel.
Yeah, it was something that really freaked me out. 6 months in, I remember this evening, it's very emotional. I have my kirpan in my hand. I do an ardas to Guru Gobind Singh Ji, and I said, sorry, I let you down. I can't continue this anymore. I have like tears in my eyes. I do a matha tek to the kirpan, and I kind of leave Sikhi for some time. I just need to find my own way back, to find that joy. And I think I'm 20 at this time or something like that. So I had this very intense moment of being an Amritari with massive hankar, massive self-doubt as well. And that kind of defined me as well, because then I knew I took 2 steps forward towards the Guru. Then it sounds a bit weird here, but I think Amrit kind of pulled me 10 steps back.
Yeah.
And then I had to find my way back to my old position.
Yeah.
So for a few years, I was just doing my own thing, basically, just trying to find my own way around this.
How did you manage that?
It was a little bit of in and out, on and off kind of thing. So I was still trying to do part, but I didn't do it consistently.
Yeah.
And instead of just doing it mechanically, sometimes I would recite the words, and then like Rag, Ratan Parvar, Rag, what's that? What's a Rag? Then I would just stumble upon the word and just sit there and watch it. And then like maybe try to Google it or Elsa Vista, whatever we had back then. And then that was kind of my way. So like instead of just repeating the words from Nitnem, I was trying to understand many of these concepts more in depth. So eventually I just decided, I made an agreement with myself. My nickname in the morning can be just sitting and being immersed in one word.
Yeah.
Just sitting there thinking about it. So that was kind of I created my own little spiritual practice, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that was what worked for me.
Yeah.
That's kind of what held me within.
It's the key. It kept you within it. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of created my own form.
Yeah.
That again worked for me. But I was always, when I went to Gurdwara, met up with Sikhs my age, I was like, they're gonna catch me out. Because if they asked me to do the job stop, if we were doing any program in the Gurdwara, we had camps. We still had camps for many years after that.
Yeah.
So the same Suki Baba and Manvir and all those lot, they still came to the Gurdwara. And I was always like, they're going to catch me out. I didn't really tell anyone that I had left my Amrit, left it, whatever you call it. So I was still like pretending to be in it. But it kept me on board. It was a little detour, but yeah.
No, that's fine. So, and like I said, so that's, you're talking about how you keep your death, how you keep things, and how that went during that time. Were you still reading at the time? So you were still immersing yourself in different things at the time?
Yeah. Definitely. I was
Yeah.
reading a lot. That's
Yeah.
almost all I did. Because
Yeah.
the Sikhs in Denmark were criticizing me for reading more than doing
Yeah, you get that.
things. Like, you're sitting there reading about karma, but why are you not practicing good karma? You're reading about the rehat, why and trying to understand the rehat. Why are you not following the rehat? Why?
Yeah.
So it was that guilt as well.
Yeah.
There was this thing in AKJ was quite prominent in Denmark at the time.
Yeah.
So you can see like me with the Sikh awareness kind of mindset. It's about the philosophy. It's about being a good person, having the right intentions. And then you had the AKJ pushing in from the other side.
Yeah.
Rehat, follow, practice.
Yeah.
I remember there was this auntie who I was talking about the yugas. I was very fascinated about the yugas. And Sikh
Yeah.
awareness, I read about this Yuga Avatar concept and like what Guru Bachan Singh Wali also talks about. I was telling this auntie in Punjabi about it, and she was like, what do you need about these yugas? Like, follow the dharma of this yuga, just do kirtan. And I was like, we're on 2 different pages here.
Exactly.
We weren't speaking the same language. We're talking in Punjabi, but we're not speaking the same language here.
Yeah.
So at around this time, I kind of left everything for a few years.
Yeah.
I had my own little spiritual practice, but then I started going more into this counter radicalization work.
Yeah.
And just immersed myself in that. Took a pause from Sikhi. But I was still on Sikh awareness, talking to Tirat Singh, Bahadur Singh, a little bit Kamalpreet Singh at this time, but all these intellectuals. Dar Singh was gaining a lot of traction around these years in the UK as well. There was whole Nahangta.
Yeah, he made it famous 2002. We brought out Sarval.info. That was when that website came out. So yeah. So he was one of the main ones at the time.
Yeah.
And like you said, some of his students were on Sikh awareness at the time, so they were on there. I'm trying to think who else was on. So you're still communicating with these people, talk to them.
On Messenger, MSN Messenger, yeah.
But that's old days, man. MSN Messenger. So I was going to ask you, we've gone through some of your journey coming into Sikhi and stuff, but you've talked about the Sikh community in Denmark and said it's about 1,000 strong.
On a good day, yeah.
On a good day. And I know, like we spoke outside of this, we were saying how they've gone from 1 Gurdwara to 2 Gurdwaras, internal conflict. That's the same as everywhere. That's normal. So I don't really want to labour on with that. But what I want to talk about now is how did you go from the point of reevaluating your position within Sikhi and what Sikhi was for you to the point where you are giving a lecture for the Oxford University, which then ends up in their papers. So tell me the process of that. You're going from doubts in your own self-belief to doing a talk there.
I think it's a gradual process. Remember I said as a child, looking back, I've always kind of been the odd one out in whatever group. I'm in, but I'm not really in. So what happens is that during this time, this is 2010, 11, 12, most people are joining. There's a big hype about this Nihang movement revival of the ancient Rag Kirtan and all these things, like all these ancient traditions. They're kind of
being revived.
And this masculine ideal of the Khalsa and so forth. And this is becoming, like I said, it's being revived. And me having the personality type I am, I see it and I enjoy it and I praise that this is happening, but I don't really want to be a part of it. I'm just standing on the side just watching it. So while everyone is immersed in this whole Khalsa and Hang warrior identity, I go the other way around and I look at the intellectual side of Guru Gobind Singh Ji because nobody else is doing that.
Yeah.
So I just kind of find my own way. I've always done that. My teacher said that as well. You always find your own way.
Yeah.
So the motorway, the highways here, you're still following the path, but you just created your own way and just going there by yourself. So while everyone's talking about Guru Gobind Singh Ji as a warrior, as this the Hang Dakalin, Hang, all these words that they use, I want to look at Guru Gobind Singh Ji as more as an intellectual.
Yeah.
Now, at this time, the only thing in writing is Louis Fenwick's book, The Darbar of the Sikh Gurus, which very nicely, from my perspective, comes out in 2008.
Okay, yeah.
So this is the time where I have this identity crisis, or whatever you want to call it. So this was gold for me, that I can actually see that Guru Gobind Singh Ji was also an intellectual, and a lot of the stuff I was reading about, like political science, political history, because I was doing the counter-radicalization work. A lot of counter-radicalization work is also about political science. Because obviously these kids who are trying to set up a caliphate. There's a political structure, there's a political system, right? So I was reading a lot about political systems and caliphate and Marxism and all that stuff. All of a sudden, I start to realize through the works of Louis Fenwick that the Guru Gobind Singh Ji was also involved in this
system, they had a system.
Exactly, this Rajniti kind of thinking. And I didn't know Gurumukhi at this time. So Louis Fenwick was really an eye-opener for me.
I was about to say, did you know Gurumukhi at the time? Because I was about to say, Darbari Ratan, Pyara Singh Padam's works are your main works at the time, aren't they?
So I actually taught myself, it sounds a bit wrong to say this, I think I taught myself Gurumukhi because I wanted to read the Darbari Ratan.
Okay, yeah. No,
because I could kind of, it sounds a bit wrong in the sense I should be doing it because of Guru Granth Sahib, but Guru Granth Sahib was transliterated on siddhigrant.org. So I kind of felt like I can still read the Guru Granth Sahib in the original language. But the Darbari Ratan had not been translated or transliterated.
Still hasn't.
Exactly. So I kind of like, I need to read this book because Louis Fenwick kept talking about it and referencing it in his book from 2008. It's out of print now, so you can't really read it. Maybe
it's on the website.
Yeah, you should be able to find it online maybe or something. But I think we went off tangent there.
No, sorry. You were talking about Fenwick's work.
Oh, yeah.
So you're looking at the political route. You took a different route.
So around this time, you want
to look at the intellectuals.
Around this time, I started going to India quite often as well. Road trips in India with some Sikh friends from Denmark. And we go to Haridwar. We're going to Rishikesh and Hemkund Sahib.
Yeah.
And through there, you have to go through Haridwar and
you do.
Gobind Ghat and these different... some of them ancient Hindu
Badrinath, they're all towards there, aren't they? Yeah.
Exactly. And it's quite interesting because when we're in Haridwar, or maybe it's Rishikesh, it's one of those Hindu cities, I go to a mandir and ask them to have the book of Chanakya, who's an ancient Indian philosopher, political thinker. And it's very interesting because I purchased two English translations with the Sanskrit as well from this mandir in Haridwar or Rishikesh. And it's interesting, but this is 2008 or 9. So I must have read on Sikh awareness or something that the one of the court poets of Guru Gobind Singh Ji had translated this Granth. Senapati, exactly. So you can see, like, I'm starting to get more and more interested in this intellectual side of Guru Gobind Singh Ji. I've heard these buzzwords about 52 poets. I've heard some names by Nandalal Goya, there's Senapati. But there's nothing in English language apart from the good book by Louis Fenwick. So I kind of realized, well, I need to make this more accessible. But first I need to educate myself in this.
I can remember that time because I can remember you contacting me and Kamalpreet and a couple of others and going, are there any parts of the Vidya Sagar Granth still available? I can remember you contacting and I was like, not that I can think of, when you're like, Kamalpreet said there is, and I was like, not that I know, other than like Padam's works that had the bits with the kavis. I didn't know there was any others available. So I remember you starting to delve into that sort of thing at that time.
Yeah.
I remember that being your interest.
And the funny thing here is that in Danish there's a word called Rasmus Modsat. The English word would be opposite Joe. Like the person who just does the opposite of everyone else. Like I said, that's kind of me. I always do the opposite of it. You know, like when I started keeping my case and wearing a turban. Yeah. For the first 10 years, I wore this very little turban. Like, it looks like a little hat or something.
Yeah, a little black one. Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah. People like, is that even a Sikh? I just didn't want to look like a Sikh, but I wanted to be a Sikh, of course. So I just had my own little weird turban style. But when you say the Vidyasagara, it's interesting why I was interested in the Vidyasagara. It's because everyone else were interested in Guru Granth Sahib. Then the Hangs were interested in the Dasam Granth. So I had the Vidyasagara to myself.
Yeah.
You see, like I just find my own way, kind of thing. And obviously, a lot of my book is based on what may have been the original Vidyasagar at some point. So I talk about that and has it survived, and what do we know about the surviving parts later on in the British colonial period, blah blah blah. But even it's interesting that you mentioned this, that you can see like that's an odd question to ask. It's not the Dasam Granth that everyone else is talking about with Dar Singh and Kamalpreet and all these great intellectuals doing good work. But I'm just sitting there finding my own little niche. And you could say the Anandpur Darbar to some extent was a niche that I dived into just because nobody else were doing it.
No, that's right. Well, that goes on to the next question, which is what led you to start the Anandpur project? Because all of a sudden you were putting bits out. You were always putting posts out. So you've always put posts out. And then I remember you asking for help, subscriptions to put money aside for projects related to the world, which we saw like Baljinder Kaur doing her picture. Then you got obviously Geet Kaur doing hers. You got
Dilarani Kaur from the US.
Virdi as well. He's done his. So on, the different people. So where it might be Senapati or where it might be Bhai Mani Singh or Pandit Sukhdev Singh. You've done all those sorts of things. But what is it that led you to that and going, I now want to start this?
I think I kind of realized the power of paintings, like visual representations. I have some vague memories of going to the Gurudwara as a child. We didn't go many times, but I remember the paintings I used to see in the Langar Hall. I remember going to New Zealand to visit my Masi when I was 14, 15 years of age, and I saw a painting in her living room of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. So I kind of realized that all this stuff I'm doing at this time, this is like 2020, just before the lockdowns, that all this reading, people don't really care much about reading. I'm just a nerd. There's a few of us who enjoy reading, but most people don't really give a shit.
No, they don't. No, they don't. 100%. People don't like reading. They want you to tell them something in 30 seconds and that's it.
That's it. So I kind of realized, all right, what we need to change and what we need to do is we need to change the visual representation of Guru Gobind Singh Ji. Because I've noticed that this whole Nihang lifestyle was reviving because people, this is my theory, they grew up watching paintings of Guru Gobind Singh Ji as a Shastrtari Guru. Being immersed with like regal warrior symbology, horses, falcons, hawks, swords, arrows, bows, all these like things, right? And my project is to say, well, Guru Gobind Singh Ji was also a scholar. Like most of the time the Guru spent on a day-to-day basis was not on warfare. It was based on literary activities. I wrote a whole book about that. So we need to change the visual representation of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, because then maybe we can kickstart people's interest later on in life. If they grow up watching paintings of the Guru as a Shastratari Guru, someone immersed in scholarly activities, if they see this as in their Langar halls 5, 6, 8 years of age, maybe when they become 20 years old, they'll be more interested in this kind of thinking. Because now they think it's anomaly. They think Sikhi is the Shastratari way, because this is what they were brought up with. So you see, we kind of disrupt that and kind of add in this other element. It would be great. So I'm looking at the paintings, doing these Google Pictures searches. With Gobind Singh Ji, the only thing that comes up is all these martial paintings. Going back hundreds of years, just martial. All right, we have to start from scratch. We have to commission someone to do these paintings, and then we just have to mainstream them everywhere. And this is how the Anandpur art project then comes about. It's basically to take the Anandpur court and just visualize it for people. So right now we have paintings of Senapati, we have of Pandit Man Singh, we have of Kavi Alam Shah, we have of Bhainandalal Goya, just some other ones and so forth. And different, the Guru and Kavi Nanua Vairagi as well. So some of these court poets that I've been making posts about, now we also have their pictures or like their
depictions of them.
So that went on for a few years, and then unfortunately, because this was like a one-man project, I started getting more immersed in writing the book. So I couldn't really focus too much on the paintings anymore. So it's kind of been on a low run for a long time. I need to kickstart it now. The book is out. I need to kickstart it once more.
Okay. I only went on to that because you talked about it. I'm going to go back to the last question because you never finished it.
Oh, sorry.
No. But obviously, you talked about the representation. Like I said, you went on to like the Vidya Saga. But how did you go from the Vidya Saga to, presenting that paper at Oxford? How did that end?
Oh yeah. So I think at some point, a lot of people were also encouraging me, saying you need to get off Instagram. Like you need to do this in a more serious manner.
Yeah.
You're not like an influencer. Not that I know how to do all these posts, but like I don't know how to use them properly. But they said you need to take this and present it to the right audiences in a more systematic manner.
Yeah.
And then I went to Oxford University for a conference a couple of years ago and presented. And I think that was also where I published for the first time that I'm writing a book on this subject. It was like, this was 2022 actually. So it was this quest of like, I should go off social media, and instead of having these small little posts, I need to go all in depth. Then I wrote an article about it. That article eventually expanded into a whole book of 350 pages.
Yeah.
So you could, to some extent, sound a bit corny, but you could say like the whole book, the early phases of the book that you have here in front of you, 346 pages, the earliest incarnations of that book are just Instagram posts.
Yeah.
And eventually these Instagram posts expanded into a whole book.
Yeah. That's fine. You've still not talked about the Oxford one, so that's good.
The Oxford what?
How you did your first Oxford book. I know you did this one, but I remember you did. You're in a book with Kamalpreet, everybody else. Do you remember it?
Oh yeah, the encyclopedia.
That's
one.
it. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
See,
I thought you meant.
No, I want to know how you got
Sorry.
to that, because that's your first published piece with your name, and you represented that and presented that.
Yeah, that's on the Sikh warrior tradition.
That's it. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I was very humble. Again, a little bit the odd one out because I think Luz Fennig is in that book.
Yeah.
Shoda Singh Kamalpreet is in that book. So I'm like, whoa, what am I doing with all these great scholars?
Yeah.
So what happened is that I started to study the Nihangs and the Sikh warrior traditions in order to balance it out with the Shastratari image of the Guru. And I was just kind of doing it on a low-key level. Like I was doing some interviews with the Shastratari participants in Wolverhampton in Birmingham. I did a lot of interviews with Nidar Singh. I was very lucky. He spent a lot of time. He gave me a lot of his time. Spent many hours with me. Yeah. And I can't remember the exact reason why I was doing all these interviews, but then a professor from Sweden in Sikh studies told me that you should participate in some of the Sikh activities.
Was it Christina Marvel?
Yeah, Christina Marvel, exactly. Yeah. She said you need to come into Sikh studies and present some of your ideas, again, for a bigger audience.
Yeah.
And then because of her help, because of her assistance, and she opened a lot of doors for me, she kind of saw that what little niche knowledge that you have, that you've immersed yourself in, could benefit the rest of Sikh studies because they're not looking into these things. So in that sense, she opened the doors for me to be published in it's in Brill encyclopedia, and a few others, Routledge and
I've got it in Routledge as
Bloomsbury as well. So yeah, and I think also just having those things published, because these like big publishing houses, also opened the door for University of California Press later on to publish a book in my name, so to speak. No,
that's wicked. Yeah, that's the one.
Sorry, it took me ages to answer that question.
No, because I was like, that was the first published paper really of yours,
and that was actually on the Sikh warrior tradition. So again, using history, how did Nihang or the warrior lifestyle look in the 1700s?
Yeah.
So I traced that in the Bansavali Nama, in the Pant Prakash, and I think in the Guru Bilas Pasha Dasme.
Yeah.
So I present that. How does it look like in the early text? And then fast forward 200 years, how do people in the UK then perform the same things? And I think this is what Christina found interesting. There's like, I'm doing that juxtaposition of the old days versus the new days. What's the differences and what are the... Yeah, sorry, that took me ages to answer.
No, that's fine. That's not a problem at all. Not just that, we saw you, was it this year, last year, wasn't it? Saw you last year. Yeah. How did you end up on the panel at the Sikh Research Conference?
That was again, this thing with like networking. So one thing I realized after I wrote my book is that a lot of this stuff is not, it sounds a bit corny, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. So I've, for many years, Upinder Ji Kaur from Wolverhampton University, we stayed in contact because obviously we met each other at different conferences here in the UK. And she's always been very supportive of my research, very like friendly, very gentle, very graceful in terms of giving me time, helping me, open doors for me, and so forth. And she said that she was working on this conference that happened last year, and I was like, cool. I really want to present some of my research on Bhai Singh. But then she asked me if I would sit in the panel and run a panel with these three other presenters.
Yeah,
and I have this complex of imposter syndrome. So I was like, I'm not really sure. I don't have a PhD. I don't have like the skills for it. But she was very encouraging. And no, just do it. You can do it. It's going to be good.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you were there, but I think it turned out quite well.
Yeah, it did. It was very good, to be honest. And like I said, that's when you mentioned that this book was on its way and you're working on it. And I think I spoke to you about, is there two Bhai Singhs in history? Is there, you get that all the time, don't you?
Yeah.
So no, that was it. But how did you feel doing that? And will you be looking to do further ones in the future?
So some people have asked me now that I have a book out, especially with an American University Press, if I'm looking of going into Sikh academia more formally.
Yeah.
This has just been a side project, like a hobby for me. If I wanted to like work more formally.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I like having it as a hobby.
Yeah.
It's the same way I think with I was talking about the Rehat and Sikhi before. When I was doing it on my own, I enjoyed it. But it was imposed on me.
It becomes hard.
Then it became a burden almost. And I think doing this as a hobby is great. If it was a job, like being a professor or being that, it would kill all the enthusiasm in me. I don't think I would enjoy it.
Yeah.
So I think I'm the kind of person. It sounds a bit cliche, but like, as long as it's a passion, I enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
When it becomes a hobby, something I need to do for a living, it takes out a lot of
the passion and wanting to do it. There's no desire to do it then, is there? Because you're being forced to do something.
Yeah.
A hobby is something that you want to pick up and do because you enjoy it.
Exactly. And I think I've been quite lucky that like I said, it's not about what you know, it's also about who you know. The people I have in my network have been very gracious in opening doors for me, helping me, pushing me in the right directions. All of them are mentioned in the acknowledgement sections in my book.
Yeah.
So I'm not really looking of going into like any Sikh academia. I mean, if I was offered something, would I reject it? I'm not sure either. It would be nice to try it out as well.
Yeah.
But it's not like something I'm pursuing actively of any sort.
Okay. Well, with regards to the book, obviously we've got the book here. Oh, failed there. How long did it take you to do this? I know you say it was a hobby. I know hobbies can take forever.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you? Let's talk about when did you start it in order to get it finished? How long did it take for people to peer review it? And are you happy with it? Are there bits that were taken out that you wanted in there? That sort of thing.
So it's a bit of a tricky question to answer because this, like I said, the first incarnations of the book were in Instagram posts.
Yeah.
Then it turned into articles of 25 pages. Then these 25 pages became 40 pages because they were peer reviewed.
Yeah.
So I had to expand them and insert new things. Then these articles got rejected by different editors because it didn't fit in with their theme and the concept they wanted to pursue, blah, blah, blah. So, and then being stubborn as I am, I was like, I'm not going to take this rejection as a rejection. I'm just going to keep going.
It spurs you on, does it?
Yeah, just like, you reject me, I'm just going to write a book then.
Yeah.
So the main gist of the book was written from 2021 to 2023. Okay. So it's about 2 years. And in that time period is the peer review process. So a lot of that is just waiting for a peer reviewer to read it and criticize it. And then they send it back and you have 2-3 months to revise it. Then you send it back. So there's a lot of that back and forth.
Yeah.
So I don't know if answering your question, like the first 25 pages article, that was in 2019.
Okay.
Then in 2020, I think I expanded into a little bit of a longer article, and then some rejections happened.
Yeah.
And then I just said, fuck it, I'm just going to write a book then.
Yeah.
And then I have no constraints either. When you're writing a research article, it has to be like 25 pages.
Yeah, exactly.
But all of a sudden, it's a book. I can just write whatever I want. And then if it ended up being a 350 something page long. So yeah, when people ask me, I'll usually just say I spend about 2 years on it in total. Yeah.
So 2 years. You say that everything in there is obviously initially, like I said, this is a problem with research books and academia books. You can write something and somebody go, take that out, take that out, take that out. And then it no longer becomes your paper because you have to tweak it to what they want and somebody else wants. And you're just like, what am I presenting? Sometimes, for me, that's why I stayed out of academia, because I'm just like, you basically want me to present something that you want, but not my work. You want me to write something and you go, I've peer reviewed this and I think you should put this and this and this. And then it becomes a bastardization of your work.
Yeah.
And you just think, well, that's really not what I wanted to give. Is there anything in there that you wanted to add, or are you know, and had to leave out?
There was a few things,
but
I'm just going to do that in the second book that I'm working on, so I can still use it. So there were some parts of the Sevapanthi translations of Imam Ghazali's writings.
Yeah.
I wanted to have some sections. Exactly. I wanted to have some sections in. It's not like they told me to remove it, just the word count was getting too long.
Yeah.
So I had some sections in about the Sevapanthis, some of the translations they did. They had to like use censorship on themselves because they need to cater for the Khalsa sentiments.
Okay.
So like there's these examples I use in my new book where I talk about in the original writings of Imam Ghazali, he says the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said these beautiful words.
Yeah.
And because the Khalsa were fighing with Muslims at the time,
they took that out.
In the translations, it doesn't say the Prophet Muhammad said so and so. It just says the Santa Lokane Kya. The saintly
Sailok. It says that again. Sailok.
Sailok, exactly.
It uses the word Sailok quite a lot.
Exactly. But this is a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah.
But because they had to appease the sentiments of the Khalsa, they kind of removed. They kept the teaching, but they removed the teacher, if that makes sense. So I thought that was a really cool information to have in the development of Sikh literature in the 1700s.
Yeah.
That it's not just translating word by word. They have to be mindful of the context that they're in.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things are anonymized, but it is still an Islamic granth. And some of these, like the sign, what's it called? Gobin Lokange.
Yeah, Sign Lokange Bachchan, which is, written by, is it? Trying to think of his name.
By Adnan Shah. Attributed to
Adnan Shah's got Fakir. He's got the Jad Fakir. So
exactly.
You got Rubiya, you got Al Halaj. You got four in there that he talks about.
But it's interesting if you read them, right? Some of them have almost these are Sufi sayings, but them have become so anonymized. You can't even say that these are said by Muslims. They could easily have been said by a Hindu Bhagat, because the vocabulary has become so Indic in tone. So this is some of the stuff I'm looking into, because these are Sufi sayings, but again, the words are more Indic in tone. Like I said,
you see
like instead of the word roza, they use the word vrat, for instance. Instead of namaz, it says bhakti or like stuff like that. Like the translations are more Indic now, rather than to use the specific Sufi terminology. So I had a lot of that in my footnotes, and I just had to remove it.
But you see that. I agree with you. You see that a lot. You see that with the Sevapanti's Masnavi Pakha as well.
Yeah.
You know, when you read... But you can read Rumi's works from Waterstones here, and you wouldn't even tell it's from a Sufi the way that it's written.
Thing. Exactly.
It's just like common philosophy for everything. Yeah, exactly. That's what it's become. And it's exactly the same with the Ismaili's work of the Nur Ilahi, which has changed to Brahm Prakash. And obviously, I've used some of that in the Japji side because I found the Brahm Prakash and put it in there. But if you look at the original works, obviously because it was called Nur Ilahi, the words were different. Whatever. When it's been translated, it's more, which is Chardi Punjab, in Gurmukhi, rather than the Lendi Punjab of Urdu and Pushtun, which it was originally. So I can understand that. So that's something we're going to see. It didn't make it into this one, but it will make it into the next one.
Yeah, I just basically copied it out, and I'll continue working on with these ideas.
Yeah. But
the thing with, as you know, like with peer reviewers, you don't really know what you're going to get.
Yeah. No.
So some of them are very supportive, and they gave me some very good suggestions and advice to make the book even more solid.
Yeah.
And others, the thing is, like, sometimes the criticism you get, you don't understand it at the time.
Yeah.
You just feel like this is completely retarded. Like, what the hell is this? Why are you saying this?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense. Have you even read the book? This is
Yeah.
like what you're thinking. Maybe a few years later, you kind of understand the criticism in hindsight. Oh, okay, now it actually makes sense. But at the time, I couldn't really see, or I'm not necessarily talking about the peer review, also just general feedback I was getting from people. So it's also a process of like maturity. Because in the beginning, you're also very much identifying with your grunt, the book that you're writing. It's like when the people criticize, it's almost like they're criticizing you.
Yeah.
This is what I mean. Like then once the book is out, then now that criticism they gave me, I can see what they meant, and they were right. But at the time, I couldn't really see it.
Yeah.
But like I said, the peer review, there's four people have peer reviewed it, and I think all of the peer review, whether it was good or bad or negative, whatever you want to call it, I think it turned the book much better than it really was.
Yeah.
It really elevated the standard of the book. It's not a perfect book. I'm not claiming this is the answer to any question, but hopefully it's just a contribution to shed light on another side of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, apart from the warrior aspect. So
one of the questions I was going to ask you later on is, what are the goals for the future with regards to this book and further projects? So you've obviously talked about there's another part coming to this, or whether it's a separate book itself. Are you still focusing on the intellectuals within the court of the Guru?
So
because obviously the terms of the Sevapanthis come afterwards, and obviously the works by Adan Shah, by Dayaram, the Ghazaliyat, which is translated as Paras Bagh, the Masnavi Bagh, they come a lot later.
So this book is about intellectual history. So normal history is just the repetition of different events that happen, and this event led to that event, and this is how people understand history. A lot of events that are being mentioned. Intellectual history is more about how ideas are coming into a community, and then how these ideas are spread and transmitted to different places. So this book is about intellectual history. So when you read it, you don't really know much about what's going on in the Sikh community. There's no events, there's no really anything of that. It's just these ideas are brought to the Sikhs, and then this is how they develop it and so forth. So again, it's intellectual history. So the only thing that really is historical in this book is the destruction of the Anandpur Darbar. It's obviously that the Kavis are coming into Anandpur. And then I talk about the destruction of the Anandpur Darbar in 1704. And then a little bit of history in terms of how the Khalsa Raj then emerges with Banda Singh Bahadur's leadership, and then obviously the missiles. But the destruction of the Anandpur Darbar, after I spent 200 pages describing all this intellectual activity, all the kavis that are there, the writings they're producing, how the ideas are flourishing, how they're introduced and influencing each other, blah, blah. Then there's that sudden
cut off.
Suddenly it ends. What I'm trying to do in my next research is to start off with the destruction of the Anandpur court in 1704 and see how do all these ideas still embed themselves onto the Sikhs. I don't know if that made any sense. So what I say is that the institution of the Anandpur Darbar is destroyed. Like physically it's destroyed. But the Sampradayas, they continue the teachings within their own ranks in a much more humble and a much more simple manner. It's more like teacher to student kind of thing. So this is where Bhai Mani Singh has a very pivotal role in ensuring that the teachings and the memory of the Anandpur Darbar continues. And in the presentation you saw me, I mentioned all these different authors who all claim lineage back to Bhai Mani Singh, which tells us he's a pivotal figure in the intellectual consolidation of the Sikh community. So what I try to do is to say, all right, there's this massive growth of Sikh intellectual tradition, and suddenly it collapses. Then how is it built up again? So a lot of the influential people here, Bhai Mani Singh, Bhai Kanhaiya,
Sant Man Singh, because obviously Pandit Gulab Singh comes straight off him.
Exactly. A lot of these are related or connected with the Anandpur court one way or the other. So this is what I mean, like they continue it. They pick up the fragments, so to speak, and then they build something new. And then we have the Gyani tradition, the Nirmala later on, we have the Sevapanthi later on, and so forth. But the origins of that is with the destruction of the Anandpur court. Because now they have to refigure, how do we preserve Sikhi in a time without a living human guru? But we still need to preserve all of this this khajana of literature that the Guru preserved. I have a theory, I'm going to work more on it, that these granths that the Sevapanthis produced, like you mentioned, the translations of Rumi's works, Imam al-Ghazali, the sayings of Rabi al-Basri and all these ones. I have a feeling or like a theory that they were actually from the Anandpur court. Then they were retranslated by the Sevapanthis, following a tradition from Anandpur. Because you see the Sikhs in the Nirmala tradition doing the same thing. They're also translating stuff, Ramayana and all these Sanskrit epics, which were also translated in Anandpur court. So they're not the first ones to do it. They're just following a tradition.
No, I agree with you, because you've got now Devendra Singh Toor's obviously helping out with the new exhibition for the Mughals at the moment, which is at the V&A. And at the V&A, you can go there and you can see the Akbarnama, you can see things like that. So even in Akbar's time, he has the illuminated manuscripts created of the Ramayana.
Yeah, that's right.
Of Krishna.
The Rasamnama.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. So he has all those. And then we know from the Gur Pratap Surj Prakash, where Kavi Santokh Singh Ji talks about it, when Satnam Pasha had met Dara Shikoh. Dara Shikoh had already put a lot of the Upanishads in, gone through the Hitopadesh. So, yeah, exactly. So it was a regal thing that you attain that. And you see that again later on where, the Raja of Ganthal just brings over Kavi Santokh Singh and goes, right, here's the money, here's the patronage, right? Get the literary works out. And you get that later on with Gyani Gyan Singh Ji writing everything on the Ripdam and Prakash and things like that. And it's carried on under the Raja and Maharaja. And obviously it comes to a stop when the Maharaja go and the Indian independence happens. But before that, there was the patronage to go, well, I expect this and I continue this. And even, you see that image of Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji's court within the Wallace exhibition where he's got everybody seated and everybody there. And then you got the scribes there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it's very similar to the picture you did of Pandit Sukhdev Singh that you had done by Keith Kaur. Where it's exactly the same. You got that regal sort of court. So that tradition seems to continue with rulers where they want the literary works done. We can go back all the way to Firdoshi's work with the Shahnameh and things like that. It was exactly the same reason. He said, give me the volume of work. The history was 10 volumes. They went too big. 4 volumes too big. It ended up being a line, but he had created the Shahnameh in its case as well. So I agree with you. There's a good chance. And like you said, you've got Bhai Mani Singh Ji who writes the Gyan Ratanavali, Gurbalas Pasha Shemi, the first Tika of the Japji Sahib. You get a number of grants attributed to Bhai Mani Singh Ji. I know people claim that's wrong or this isn't right, or you'll always get that out there.
Yeah, fair.
And like you said, with Sant Man Singh Ji, you got the direct lineage to Pandit Gulab Singh. Babadeep Singh Ji, Shahidi Missile. I don't know what was actually, but obviously they were doing the Shahi and the Bidis and writing the Granths themselves. So Santokh Singh obviously writes the Gurbalas Pasha Dasmi. So so those things work from there. Senapati was already around, so it'd be interesting.
And this is the thing, because after the destruction, exactly, good to bring out all these parallels, because a lot of the destruction of the Anandpur court, it just means that Sikh intellectual tradition has to take on a new form. It's not what I call centralized anymore. Centralized under Guru Gobind Singh Ji. There's a handful of patrons. There's a lot of wealth. There's a lot of poets who are receiving this wealth. And there's direction. The Guru wants these particular granths to be translated and studied, and then they have a direction. Then with the destruction of the Anandpur court in 1704, this power is decentralized. The direction is decentralized. Now the different Sikhs, with their own inspiration and so forth, they have to direct their own direction, if that makes sense. This is why you see these little pockets and these little communities of scholars who are each doing their own thing to preserve the Vidya of Anandapur, but they're not doing it under one leadership. Apart from Bhai Mani Singh, who you can say is a first among equals here, because he's still a part of the community as an equal, but he's also first among equals because they look towards him as a leader of sorts. And then one thing I like to highlight about the book, which I think most people hopefully will find interesting, is in my footnotes. I try to show that a lot of the things that was happening in Anandpur court, this is one thing I was also directed towards in the peer review. You need to highlight this much more. In the beginning, I didn't have that in early drafts. Then I highlighted much more. But every time I mention one of the grunts in the Anandpur Code, I also show how Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and Maharaja Narinder Singh, Karam Singh, Fateh Singh, all these different Sikh kings, how they are patroning the same grunts to be produced by their court poets.
Yeah.
So you can see that they're continuing that Anandpuri tradition.
Court
if that
tradition,
makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah, and we have this weird, maybe from the colonial period, like these ideas that the Sikh Sardar, especially from the Misl period, they were just these rogue warriors.
Yeah.
A lot of them are literate. It's quite often said Maharaja Ranjit Singh was illiterate. But I'm trying to show as well, maybe they were, who knows, but they were also connoisseurs of the arts. They appreciated beauty when they saw it, they recognized it, and they would honor it and obviously patron it.
Yeah.
So I'll give all these examples. Maharaja Ranjit Singh was a patron of this Granth, the Panchtantra, the Hitubdesha, the Shahname, Maharaja Narinder Singh, Karam Singh in particular from Patiala.
Yeah.
A lot of the Granths from the Mahabharata, but also like Persian writings, the Bostan, Sheikh Sadi's Gulistan. I think I mentioned the Akbarnama as well.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. A lot of name dropping. Sorry about that. But just to show that this is the Sikh community has a very large intellectual tradition that has, for many good reasons, been outsided by the martial tradition.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's a story that deserves to be told. So I try to do that with this book, and hopefully people will enjoy it. So
No, that's for me. That links back to our days, like I said, on Sikh awareness, because that was the first time you heard about half these Granths. Was the first time somebody goes, "Have you seen this Granth?" And somebody goes, "Yeah, I know that Granth." And somebody goes, "Have you seen this one?" No, not. Right, okay. What do we know about this? And then the collective comes in, going, "Right, here's this, here's that, here's that." And it's amazing when you look at how many Granths there are. Pandit Tara Singh Narottam's got tons and tons of works. Gyani Gyan Singh's got over 40 works. Mahant Ganesha Singh's got so many works. But like you said, they come off a lineage that dates all the way back. Whether people agree with that or disagree with that is a different thing. And again, you've said the right thing. The Seva Panthis, they come off Bhai Kanhaiya. Bhai Kanhaiya took Bhai Sevaram. Bhai Sevaram gives all the teachings to Bhai Udan Shah, and then it begins to flourish. And then they take over what is the northwest of Pakistan and Afghanistan,
Sindh,
and they're in Sindh, they're in all that area, and they take on. They're the ones that are mixing in with the Iranians, the Safavids, all those people from Ashgabat and all those people coming through the trade routes. It's those people that are coming through.
exactly.
So the stories are being crossed, the stories are being shared. And then, like I said, I put up a post the other day about Bhai Udan Shah not being, not fearing his life. He was like, I can't say that. Yes, I'm a Sikh of the Guru, but Guru Nanak Dev Ji, there's no difference between them and Guru Gobind Singh Ji, but being a coward is a different thing. So they still had that, but they were intellectuals. He was with a Sufi at the time. He was sharing stories with a Sufi at the time. So yeah, you get that cross through. That would be interesting for me. That would really be interesting. Are you presenting some of those in papers first, or is it going to come out in a book? All that work.
So some of it is coming out in a paper. Hopefully, it's being peer reviewed at the moment.
Yep.
Again, these things takes ages.
Yeah.
And then I will most likely expand that. It's about 30 pages now. I'll most likely expand that into a full book. But the next book is not going to be like 350 pages. I'll keep it much shorter, like 120 pages max.
That's what I kept saying, and then they get bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's a lie. You'll figure out. I've got all this now, and I can't put this. Trying to keep a book to 120 is difficult. Yeah.
But what exactly? What I'm also trying to do. Actually, one thing I really like. I mentioned you in my acknowledgement section as well because
I paid you to do that. That's good. That's it. Exactly.
Yeah, I got bills to pay.
That's it. Exactly. That's it. We need to earn money.
But also because you were pioneering in the sense that you set up this website, Gurmat Vichar. I don't know when you.
No, that was set up in 2002. I thankfully got the Singh who's involved in it was busy with other stuff and he just went, put on whatever you want. It's like, as long as, there were certain things he said, this doesn't go on, but this does. And he almost gave me free reign. So that's where I was able to go, right, record this, get this.
And some people went on for the gatha that you used to like regularly put up.
Yeah.
I primarily went for the PDFs.
Yeah.
And many of the Granths that I am referencing in this book, especially by Veer Singh and by Gan Singh Nabha, I got that from your website.
Yeah.
So obviously I I wouldn't have access to that kind of video if it wasn't for websites like the one you created. And this is why, again, like I had to put you on there. But I don't think it's we should undervalue the importance of like setting up these platforms, whether it's a YouTube channel or it's a website or it's a social media platform, whatever, because some people will read it and then maybe 10 years later it'll benefit them. But I'm looking at my iPad. I don't use an iPad that often, but I had one back then. And when I go into my album and see what did I screenshot, I've noticed a lot of them are from the PDFs I found on your page. So I just want to thank you for that.
So I stole that from somebody else. All I did was steal that from somebody else's work and check it out. That's all we did.
Keep on stealing.
The same up for the bond, wasn't it? It was just bringing it up. Well, you were at that age. I was at that age where getting a tape, getting a book, we had to go through a lot of work.
Exactly.
So when we started doing that, that's just made life easy. Today's generation wouldn't even understand how difficult it was to source a book from Punjab or trying to get one from Hardwar or Delhi or whatever. Or it was just chaos.
But also because a lot of the books you're putting out there is exactly those books that were so difficult to get from India. Like you go to Singh Brothers or like, but even then you're not even sure they would have it. A lot of the Nirmala knowledge I have in my new paper, they're from those PDFs. I could get them from India as well, but I don't have. But I have them in the PDF, luckily. Because
initially that was it. It was like you got one book and somebody borrowed it. And it happened a lot. They borrow it and you'd never see it again. And that would happen all the time. So it was a case of, no, this is the easiest way to do it. It was painstaking labor, but it was the best thing to do. No, that's great. Are you going to be doing, I know you're doing talks here, university talks, based upon the book. Are all your talks the same talk, or you got different talks lined up for the next couple of days?
So the one I have today here in Leicester is going to be more focused on Rajniti and political statecraft theories. So it's very focused on that. How has that been covered in Sikh academia and also in the time of Guru Gobind Singh? The next ones in Oxford and Royal Holloway are a bit more focused on the intellectual tradition. So they're a bit more similar to one another. And I'll go more into the manuscript research I've done in the Dr. Deepinder Singh collection from London. He has a lot of the Anandpuri writings from the time of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, so later copies. But he's been very graceful in allowing me access to his collection of Puratan Pothiya. So I'll be sharing a lot of information about those Pothiya and what can we say about how they were used in the time of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. There are like some interesting notes in the margins, and then we'll dive into that. So Oxford and Royal Holloway is going to be more intellectual stuff, and today in Leicester is going to be more about the political stuff. That's
good because we ain't got any intellectuals here, so it makes sense. That's pretty good, It's Leicester, isn't it? You know, you come to university to mess around here. Oxford is where you've got the grades, so you need intellectuals there. That makes sense. You've picked the right crowd. No, that's fine, Singh. Like I said, I just want to cover one last bit, and that's about your personal work, the work that you're doing now. So you've been doing, I've seen it online, you've been doing work with regards to honour-based violence and faith-based violence and things like that. Can you tell me some more about that work? Because obviously you finished your last lot of work in 2019, which you talked about, which was the prevent stuff. And is this what you jumped onto after that? And how did you get into this?
So it was a bit of a gradual process as well. So in 2013, the city where I was employed in the city of Copenhagen, they were asked to create what we call a city action plan to prevent honor-related abuse towards women. And just randomly, they asked me if I wanted to participate in creating that action plan. And I think I was still a student helper at the time, but I was quite well-versed. I had a lot of time on my hands because I didn't really... So I just said yes to that. The thing is, I'm more of a practitioner than a theorist. So I thought it was really weird that they're asking me to do this national capital city plan without having much knowledge about it apart from like reading books on the subject. So what I did is I tried to, this is a long story, I tried to get a job at a shelter where women run off to from abuse. I don't know what you call it here.
It's just I was going to say it's a hostel, but it isn't. It's just a safe house for them, basically.
Safe house. Yeah, exactly. So I've got a job there as a night guard, if that makes sense. So I could talk to the women and hear their stories out and what do they experience and so forth. And then I would take that knowledge and add it into the action plan, so we could have an action plan that actually works and helps the people that's supposed to benefit. So I was there at the shelter for about a year and a half, working primarily during the nighttime. Then the day I went to my job, at the school. So this was just something I was doing next to the counter radicalization work. But I was kind of building up a niche, again, talking about niches here, because there wasn't that many people in Denmark working in this field. So I was kind of building up that niche while I had the other niche of the counter radicalization work. And then I started getting a lot of death threats and stuff like that from the people who had been to Syria, came back, and a lot of these are crazy people. Like they've been in gang environments and stuff like that. So a lot of the death threats I had gotten in the year 2014, 15, 16, it just started getting to me when at some later point in time, like, whoa, what the hell happened there? I could actually have been really seriously beaten up when they ganged up on me every now and then. I'm not exaggerating, but like it did happen a few times. So I was just like, this is actually dangerous work. And I can't really, my family can't really be part of, like, I can't really expose them to this kind of danger just because of the work that I do. So in 2017, 18, 19 or something like that, I just knew I need to go away from the counter-radicalization work over to something more safe, which was then sounds a bit weird, but then the
honor-based violence.
Yeah, honor-based violence. And then I've been doing that almost non-stop since.
So is that a strategic work for Copenhagen itself, or is it for...
No, so what happened is that now this is on a national scale. So it's the National Center for the Prevention of Honor-Related Abuse. So I'm still kind of doing the same work. It's a national action plan. I'm teaching and training trainer programs. Police officers, social workers, teachers especially have a big focus on schools now. But it's also like doing work for the government, for the minister, for the politicians, in terms of like setting a direction. And if they have any questions, what do we do? What do we know? Then me and my team are part of answering that whole process. We call it political work, basically.
Do you help implement law and legislation as well?
We have a lot now. We didn't have it back in 2011. So there's a lot of things that are being criminalized now, which helps us with psychological violence is a new thing. That's been banned.
Control and coercive behavior.
Exactly. Like that marriages with minors, that's been criminalized now. FGI, what do you call that? Female genital mutilation. FGM, that's been banned. Forced marriages, that's been banned in Denmark now as well. There's a lot of things that have been banned now, which makes it easier for us to work with. Because before it was more of a gray zone. It's just like it's different cultural ways of doing things. Like they get married younger, hence it's a cultural thing. Now it's illegal, so now you can punish the parents if they engage in under minor age marriages and so forth. So
I'm guessing you'd still have a foot in with the prevent teams here as well.
No, not at all.
Nothing at all.
No.
I'm surprised because you think to yourself sometimes where you get the honor-based stuff, you might get somebody a bit more towards the far right or towards radicalization because of cultural views, let alone religious views, because cultural views are massive, especially when you come in, like you said, with FGM and things like that. They all come from cultural views. So I didn't know whether you'd still have a foot in there with having to refer things from this side to the other side now.
Every now and then there is a bit of a crossover. You can see in a lot of these extremist milieux, there's a lot of honor-related abuse happening to the women. But it's not really that much. I'm not really interested in that kind of work. I've kind of put that behind me now. But we do see it every now and then, that there is a lot of that coercive control and stuff happening.
No, that's fine. Right, with regards to my questions, I'm about done. But is there anything you want to clarify with regards to what you've said, or want to add anything to what you've said?
Nothing.
You're just I just want to get out of here.
It's
freezing.
I enjoy it.
It's just like, are you freezing? I don't want to stay here anymore.
No, this is good weather. I'm from Denmark. I love it.
For those who haven't got the book, I had to buy it today. Satnam Singh's got the book. It's #1 trending in the UK at the moment with regard to Sikhism. The Road to Empire by Satnam Singh, aka Amardeep Singh, because that's his real name. That's how I'll always know him. And like I said, pick it up, people. This is going to be a different type of knowledge from what you're going to get anywhere else. And otherwise, you'll have to pick up the Darbari Ratan and start reading that in Punjabi.
Definitely.
Oh, that's good. I see that's the Door's picture as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the wicked one.
No, he's very graceful, allowing me to use it.
See,
He's been very supportive.
At least you've asked. I'm one of those idiots that just picks up any picture and goes, chuck it on there.
It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission, right?
It's easier. It's easy to do that. It's always better to do what you want to do, get your beer from your parents, rather than asking and getting told no and then being let down.
Like I said, ask for permission, not ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Definitely. No, that's fine. If there's nothing else, I just want to say thank you very much. You've made such an effort to come to us, and I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time. And like I said, if there's anything we can do to help plug that, please let us know.
Thank you.
I'll put up a post later today. But from Flawed and Foolish, thank you for being fantastic today.
Oh no, I was the flawed one.
Well, whatever. Yeah. I even took it for an apple pie, got a chai today, so he's had that. So. But no, thank you very much. Waheguru ji Khalsa,
Waheguru ji Khalsa, Waheguru ji ki Fateh.